So, first things first, I love this game. Majora's Mask is my favorite game in the Legend of Zelda series to date, despite being my second experience in the Zelda universe. While, like many people, I had to put the game down on my first time through. But it wasn't the thing that makes most people put the game down, at least not directly? No, this game scared me. Weird, since I beat the well and the Shadow Temple from Ocarina of Time at this point, but yeah, this game scared the hell out of me. Basically, my run completely and utterly stopped on the first temple when I found a room with nothing but darkness and glowing eyes. I kind of freaked out, I froze up, and I was killed by the weakest enemies in the game. Something about this game, the lower tone in music, the subtle and not so subtle references of death, the moon coming out of the sky, this game kind of plays like a horror game. Yeah, this game is tense and the timer doesn't exactly help much, but I found out how to deal with the time correctly rather quickly. Most people did not. Still, a lot of people seem to like this game after returning to it and mastering the time-based mechanics. Not everyone loves the game, however, and there are certainly people who dislike the game overall, and that's okay. It may be my favorite Zelda game to date, but that doesn't mean people have to love it. See, people can have different opinions, and that is oddly okay. Honestly though, I've been eagerly awaiting to talk about this game on a review-based level, so let's get this festival started. Let's take on Majora's Mask! So, Link is basically wandering around the forest looking for a missing friend. Oh, I should point out at this time this is the exact same Link from Ocarina of Time. He was sent back into the past and, well, this is the past. Anyway, it is implied Link is hunting for Navi the fairy. However, none of this is really important. What is important is that he's more or less robbed by Skull Kid. Skull Kid shows up in a weird mask and takes off with Epona in the Ocarina of Time, and heads deep into the woods. Link chases, has a dab of acid, and ends up in a new world. Before he can explore the new world, Link is turned into a Deku Scrub, a plant-based being that was a minor enemy in the first game. Link is also left with one of Skull Kid's two fairy companions. The fairy is kind of an ass, but warms up to Link over time, and probably turns into Midna, because, you know, she reminds me of Midna. Anyway, the two chase after Skull Kid, meet the dead body of a Deku that looks remarkably like Link currently does, and then meets Happy Mask Salesman, also a character from Ocarina of Time. Happy hints very heavily that there are some issues, and if Link gains back his precious possession, Happy can turn him back. In return, Link has to collect the mask that Skull Kid is wearing, Majora's Mask, and return it to Happy. Oh, and Link only has about 3 days to do all of this. The reason is pretty obvious when you go outside and see the skyline. The moon with a face on it is falling down. I'm with Happy. I wouldn't want to be there either when that thing hits. Anyway, Deku Link has to learn about the people of this new town, Clock Town, and learns that the moon is about to hit on the day of the Festival of Time. I guess the people running out of time on the Festival of Time is a joke to Skull Kid. Anyway, Link ends up in the clock tower right before the moon hits. He steals back his ocarina and remembers the Song of Time. He then warps back to the first day of the 3-day cycle, and then from Happy, learns the Song of Healing. The Song of Healing turns the Deku Curse into a mask, giving Link the powers of a Deku Scrub whenever he needs to. However, Happy, ironically, isn't happy about Link not bringing back Majora's Mask with him. The mask is an incredibly powerful artifact imbued with evil magic. You know, the type to corrupt people who are overly lonely or something like that. Anyway, now that Link is free from his curse and can use his powers as well as the Deku powers, Link must head out to the 4 areas nearby to save the lands. In the swamp, the clear water has turned poisonous. In the mountains, it is forever winter. In the ocean, monsters are everywhere. And in Ikana Valley, the dead are restless. Every time Link deals with an issue, he ends up in a temple freeing a giant of some sort. The giants are guardians, you know, they're the ones that are getting things done in this story. Once you have them all free, Link ends up back at the clock tower and summons them with a song. They stop the moon and everything ends. For about 2 seconds. It is suddenly revealed that Skull Kid ended up unconscious, and the mask itself becomes sentient. It heads into the moon and Link chases after. Link ends up in some type of lovely landscape with a bunch of kids who all look like Happy, but with masks on. They talk about being mask salesmen and question happiness and friendship. It is so weird here. When Link is ready, anyway, he talks to one of the kids wearing Majora's mask, and the final fight begins. Link kills the mask, which mutates and sprouts legs, and eventually grows a demonic head. After the fight, the mask has its evil powers removed, Happy gets its back, Skull Kid has a reunion with the giants who were friends of his back in the day before becoming guardians. After a good cry and a revelation that this is the same Skull Kid you can play music for a heart piece in Ocarina of Time. Yeah, you get a solemn farewell and the festival happens. All is well that ends well. This is more of a character building story where the characters around you have so much to experience and share. Not that the main story isn't good, but the best part of the writing is easily the interactions with people in the game. Since everyone has different schedules during the 3-day cycle, especially during Clocktown, you can change things up by finding events with said characters or watch them and see how they deal with life. Not every character has super interesting art during the 3-day cycle, but there's enough livelihood to bring out great character writing. It's frankly amazing. And you know, the amazing soundtrack really brings out things too. Atmosphere, either creepy, chilling, or lively. The music is fantastic. While it isn't all upbeat, I can never get enough of the Song of Healing. Clocktown's music that changes with each day, reflecting how bad things are getting, is fantastic as well. There are so many more examples, but I'd be here for a while. I highly recommend the OST if you don't mind some slower but lovely melodies. As for the graphics, for an N64 title, this game looks great. Use that new engine to great lengths. The 3DS remake captures the lovely use of rainbows and colors as well. The only real issue with the charm is that, you know, some of the character models are very, very familiar looking. There's a decent sized chunk of character models borrowed from Ocarina of Time. Time crunch and all that. This game only had a year to develop from what I've heard. It was made alongside Master Quest for the Ocarina of Time, but since Master Quest barely saw the light of day, Majora's Mask ended up being the one with the top billing instead. Master Quest was made for the N64 disk drive, and was an early example of DLC, more or less. Since that add-on failed, suddenly Nintendo had a lot more faith in Majora's Mask. Probably a good thing some of the team didn't want to go back and work on Ocarina of Time more, and wanted to try something new. Anyway, because of this, some of the characters from Ocarina of Time had new versions here, and some were flat out reused. However, while obvious at first, not every character is a carbon copy from previous games. There are unique Deku people, some Gorons, and some Zoras as well. Also, most of the monsters are relatively new too. Some older foes got upgraded in looks, but most of the bosses and mini-bosses are brand new to this game, and only a few of the minor monsters, get repeated. Now, since Majora's Mask does borrow a lot of elements from Ocarina of Time, you can imagine the gameplay is roughly the same. And it is for the most part. There aren't a huge amount of new items and weapons to look through. The hookshot looks different, and so does the mirror shield, but they more or less function the exact same way. Hell, the Lens of Truth returns and it's basically the same damn item. Yeah, not much has changed with regular Link. However, as mentioned previously, you can transform. Deku Link moves somewhat fast. He learns to spit bubbles as projectiles and can fly out of flower pads. He isn't great at combat, however. Goron Link is powerful and hits like a freight train. He can roll super fast and damage anything he hits. He is also heavily fire resistant. Zora Link is okay on land, able to use boomerang fins to collect items and attack, but his real potential is underwater, able to swim fast and form a magic shield while swimming. Not a huge amount has changed. Link is still versatile as ever, with plenty of new abilities and gameplay options through his transformations. It may not sound like much on paper, but these are fun forms to play with and bring new layers of puzzle solving. It's amazing how changing up a bit of Link's movement does so much for the game, if I'm honest. So, Majora's Mask only has 4 main dungeons, and a few smaller mini-dungeons. There isn't much in the way of level design, so they crammed as much into these levels as possible. That isn't always a bad thing, however. The level design is more streamlined with less empty space than Ocarina of Time had. Take the Overworld, for example. it doesn't take all that much time to get from Clocktown, the central hub of the game, to the swamp or the mountains. Even if you don't want to explore the fields, there are warp points to get you from one place to another with a simple ocarina song. After you unlock them, of course. You have to activate the proper owl statue, and bam, that owl statue becomes a warp point. This makes fast travel a breeze, especially appreciated with the limited time. Normally, statues appear right outside the dungeon entrance too, so as long as you know the appropriate song to enter, you can just fast travel to the dungeon on the first day of the 3-day cycle. It's pretty dang useful, if I'm going to be honest. I really like the fact that you can just, warp to the dungeon on the first day of the 3-day cycle. It almost makes being paranoid kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? Nah, I'm only kidding with you guys. Anyway, I should explain the time travel mechanics, shouldn't I? Okay, it's like this. You have 3 in-game days to really get anything done and to play around in. You can play the Song of Time to reset the cycle anytime you wish. You don't lose main items like bows or hook shots or anything like that. Masks, including boss masks, also stay with you. If you know a song, you keep that song. To enter a main dungeon, you need to learn a song. Once you learn that song, it is safe to go to the owl statue near the dungeon, reset the 3-day cycle, and then just start the dungeon on the first day of the cycle. This makes dungeons easier to manage for sure, and once you beat the dungeon, if you need to, you can warp back to the boss fight to do things like bring Spring back to the mountains so you can wrap up some side quests. Lastly, there are alternate ways to play the Song of Time to manipulate time further. I wish the game would do a better job telling you this, though. It's not very direct. The only way to learn this in the game is to mess around with your ocarina, or talk with this random scarecrow and activate a very specific dialogue option to get the information. More or less, you can play the Song of Time backwards to slow down time, making things even easier on yourself. And you can double each note on the song to warp around the day cycle in general. Like if you want to go to 1 a.m., you can do that. In the original game, you went to either the next, noon or the next midnight coming up on the clock. But in the remake, you can warp to any hour you want, as long as you haven't already passed it. You can't go back in time an hour, unfortunately. The game doesn't really tell you this, but it doesn't need to actually learn it either. You can just go and play those at any time after you learn the Song of Time. So there's that hint for you guys. Anyway, the overworld and the mini dungeons are fun, mostly. The only issue is getting through Icona Canyon and the back and forth in the mountain region to learn the song you need. In Icona Canyon, you need to get through a mini dungeon that requires a very specific item to beat. This item you have to buy in Clocktown. It only has 2 other uses. Both of these uses are directly after the Snowhead Temple in the mountain. You bomb a rock so you can, buy them later on, and you bomb a rock guarding the way to the ranch so you can get Epona back. During the ocean, you never use one of these special bombs, and in most of Icona Canyon, you won't need one either. It's just a random piece of padding for this one dungeon. Oh, and you go a lot through, Snowhead, speaking of which. You need to activate Spring a lot for a lot of dungeons. There's a lot of back and forth to get to Snowhead Dungeon in general, and I like it. As for the dungeons themselves, I like 2 of them. Woodfall, which is the Swamp Temple, is a really fun dungeon. It's challenging for a beginning dungeon, but has some fun, tricky puzzles. The boss fight here is really fun too. The main temple in Icona Canyon is fun as well. Challenging with puzzles and some obstacles and a lot of mini-bosses. Once again, the main boss here is really fun. You get a special transformation mask, the Giant's Mask, to fight the bosses with, in Icona Canyon. It's great and even better in the remake since you have to, take on the boss slightly differently. Now, the Snowhead Temple on the mountain is a bit of a different story. This level is huge, very vertical, and somewhat confusing to navigate. Sound familiar? Yep, it's a similar issue with the Water Temple, but with ice physics. Haha, lovely. While the rooms are more distinguishable than the Water Temple, it's still an absolute annoying temple to run through, especially if you missed something. The boss, though, is actually really fun, but his name is lame. Who names their monster Got? Oh well. Then there's the Great Bay Temple. Oh boy, my least favorite of the bunch. Zora Link makes swimming much easier, but while navigating a whirlpool with tons of water-based puzzles, this level can be annoying and also really difficult to navigate. Even the boss isn't that great. Too easy in the original and super annoying to kill in the remake. George? This boss is the worst in both versions. Real shame. Last up is Majora's Mask, which is actually a really fun fight for sure. Overall, there's a lot of good level design and a few blemishes that are kind of big enough to stand out, if I'm honest. Still, with how few actual dungeons there are, you are missing out on most of the game unless you hit up a lot of the numerous side quests in this game. There is a ton to do and collect in Majora's Mask. You have returning upgrades like wallets and heart pieces, bigger bags and quivers. The biggest collectible, however, are the masks. Some masks are ones, that you just use for one time to get a piece of heart, but some are very useful in the long run. My favorites are the Bunny Hood, the Romani's Mask, and the Blast Mask. The Blast Mask is easy enough to get once you're regular-ass Link again. First night, stake out a thief in the North Clock Town, save Grandma from getting robbed. Now you almost replace bombs entirely. Nice. The Bunny Hood requires a bit more, as you need the Bremen Mask first. Just talk to somebody in the laundry pool on the second day, and you can march around with animals following you. Now enter the ranch and march a long line of baby cuckoos, and bam, Bunny Hood. Increased running speed is awesome in this game. When you're able to get into the ranch on day 1, you can stop an alien invasion and help stop thieves, for the Romani Mask, which lets you into the milk bar. The milk bar allows you to buy healing milk, an expensive brew of milk that gives you infinite magic until you reset the 3 days. Nice! The biggest collection of masks is gained in the 3-day huge side quest line reuniting a lovely couple, one of which is cursed by Skull Kid. Interesting. They're more than willing to die for each other, which is sweet, I guess. They even get married in the end credits, which is awesome. There's actually a lot of good writing into this one. When you're not out collecting masks, you can go fairy hunting. Each of the 4 main temples has 15 fairies to find. They are very well hidden, but you get some really good rewards for them. On the first 3-day cycle as a Deku Scrub, you find a great fairy in Clock Town, and you gain magic bubbles by putting her back together. Do this again as Link, and you get the Great Fairy Mask. This mask helps you collect these fairies, so I highly recommend it. The temple fairies give you higher defense, more magic, a powerful spin attack, and the best sword in the game that is used like an item. Huh. I'd love a replica of the Great Fairy Sword, though. It looks so cool. You can upgrade your standard sword as well. If you bring Spring back to the mountains, you can upgrade your sword to the Razor Sword, which will wear out after 100 strikes. Oops. Win Gold Dust in the Goron race, though, and you can upgrade it again to get the Gilded Sword, which is awesome. Razor Sword does look really cool, however. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, there are 2 spider houses. They are basically large houses with gold sculptulas all over the place, and you can kill all of them for a Mask of Truth or a bigger wallet, depending on which house you're in. There are a bunch of minigames to play for heart pieces like beaver racing, shooting galleries, or, taking a picture of Tingle. You can fish in the remakes. That's something, I guess. You can keep track of all these side quests with the Bomber's Notebook. That's nice. You can join the Bombers game as Link. You end up getting their notebook, or you're just kind of given the notebook in the remake. This allows you to keep better track of side quests and events. The remake's notebook is better too, so that's way nice. If you get all the masks, you can turn them in for little minigame challenges at the end of the game in the moon. Yeah, that's cool. Complete all of them and don't mess up the random bomb choose section like I did, and you get the Fierce Deity Mask. I don't really care for these challenges though. They're a little picky on movements for me, especially with the Goron rolling or Zora jumping out of the water. Meh. You can also get 4 heart pieces from these though, and the Fierce Deity Mask is powerful as all hell. It kills boss fights very easily, although I ended up fighting Majora very normal this time around. And you also can't use Fierce Deity outside of boss fights, so there's that. Take it with a grain of salt, but hey, at least it's something for kind of going the extra mile and collecting all the masks. So overall, is Majora's Mask the perfect Zelda game? No. Is it the perfect 3D Zelda game? Still no. However, I do think you're most likely going to like it. Time manipulation can be a bit complicated sounding at first, but once you get the hang of it and figure out the note manipulation of the Song of Time to help out, it should be a fun time. This game isn't friendly to newcomers of the genre, but it isn't so challenging that it's impossible, just a lot of busy work. Overall though, even getting the basics of it, the Snowhead Temple and the Great Bay Temple still kinda suck, along with several other parts of the world that you need to explore. Everything else though should be a fun time. Sure, not all the side quests are fun or fulfilling, but there's so many, there should be something for you at one of these turns. The writing is mostly great, and the graphics and the OST are fantastic for this level of game. And the gameplay is fantastic since you're basically playing as Ocarina of Time, but with 3 more playable characters. Overall, I think Majora's Mask is amazing in my opinion, and if you'd like adventure games, I highly recommend trying it out. Like I said, time manipulation is a big part, but easy to get to know if you talk to a scarecrow enough times. Man, that's a weird sentence to say. However, if you're talking about the original version from the N64, which is the easiest version to get a hold of, I would bump it down to great, if I'm honest. Yeah, it's still great, but the issue of waiting for time-specific events, especially during side quests, really hurts it a lot. Oh, that would be a 9 out of 10 for the 3DS and an 8 out of 10 for the N64 if you're number junkies. Anyway, that's all the time I have to gush over this game. If you liked the video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know if you played the game or not. Subscribe for more content, blah blah blah. Thank you. Bye-bye.